Welcome to Think Smart with TMFG. I'm Mike Connon. This is John Alganetti, financial advisor of CI Assante Wealth Management. Well, Happy New Year, John.
Yeah, Happy New Year, Mike, and Happy New Year to our listeners listening at home.
I guess as we come in, we see all the eventful things that happen the New Year. Usually there's always some government whatever you want to call them, going on over the weekend.
Yeah, unfortunately starting the year off with a bang, with no pun intended. So
yeah, it's big on news is right now is the whole thing that's going on in Venezuela and what happened. And again, why it's important. Venezuela is the largest oil reserve in the world.
Oh yeah.
Now, for people who know about oil, being the largest isn't the most important thing in the world because it's not ideally cheap oil. When you look at Saudi Arabia, it's a much cheaper, much lighter, much sweeter grade of oil that you get from Venezuela. It's more of the oil we deal with in Canada, more of
a bit more dirty,
a little bit more dirty and a little bit more expensive to refine. But again, nonetheless, it is one of the biggest reserves in the world. And, it has been controlled by the Venezuela government, which has been pretty corrupt.
Yeah, to say the least.
Yeah, and it's funny because I have mixed feelings on this. I don't really know. Usually I have a really strong opinion on this. And, my experience with Venezuela was I have a lot of friends in Guyana, which is a neighbor nation to Venezuela. And Guyana, a few years ago, had one of the largest new discoveries of oil in the world. And it took a relatively poor nation and made it one of the wealthier nations per capita in the world quite quickly. And it was interesting. I remember when I was speaking to my friends, they said Venezuela went and redrew the borders to go in to take the part of Guyana that had the oil, and they just went and redrew them and said, no, that's our land now. So it's always been a very corrupt government. Their hope was that the U.S. had a lot of money invested into Guyana and wouldn't let that happen, which they didn't. And again, this goes a little bit further to that.
Yeah, and I think you're not the only one to have the mixed feelings about it because, there's a lot of Venezuelans that are happy with the change as well. Maybe not how it happened, but to your point, they have been dealing with a corrupt government for quite a while. So to have this instant change, I think a lot of people do have, mixed feelings is a really good way to put it.
Yeah, I guess, they had elections, but they weren't really what we'd call free elections.
Yeah,
so
not like in Canada.
You go down to a lot of the parts of the world and you realize we take democracy for granted over here because we do have, you hear all these complaints about elections that they may be, there may be a vote or two that goes the wrong way. But when you go to these different nations over there, the elections are really a formality to make sure they get whatever they want to be done.
Yeah. So, now that we're at this point where obviously the U.S. has done what it's done, they've captured the president, but now going forward, how is Venezuela going to continue forward and how will they be governed?
Yeah, I was watching the press conference with Trump and they said, who's going to run it? And Marco Rubio is behind him. He's saying, well, these guys are going to run it. So it's a bit of a scary thought that you're going to go and run your country. There's enough stuff going on in your own country rather than try to take over another country, which you have no experience in and try to take over that. In the short time, the vice president was Delcy Rodriguez, and she's currently she got sworn in president. So I guess for now she's in charge. But that's part of that whole vote where everything was a little bit, I wouldn't say the most legitimate democracy around to put her in charge. So we'll see what goes on that and see how this government's going to go. We've seen the U.S. in the past try to run foreign governments in oil back in, the 80s and 90s, and it turned out to be disastrous in the long run. Whenever you go and just try to manage other people's problems, sometimes there is some long-term issues. And I guess we're hoping we're not going to see the same thing as we saw in the Middle East.
In the Middle East, yeah. I think that's the biggest concern that a lot of people have been dealing with, and obviously, there is a reason for the U.S. to do this, and it all comes back to the dollar, and it all comes back to oil at the end of the day. Yeah,
the reasons were, they started the reasons being drugs, and we all can agree there's big problems with drugs on the streets now, and it's becoming very much an issue. And I get the idea of trying to solve that, and they went off Venezuela, they talked about Colombia. But it seems odd. There's a lot of problems in the world with countries that don't have oil.
Exactly.
They don't seem as concerned about them.
That's exactly right.
So it may be, and Venezuela, when you go back to it, it was actually one of the original OPEC nations. So in 1960, OPEC was formed with Iran, Iraq, and Venezuela is one of those countries in there. So it's been part of OPEC for a long period of time. I'm not sure how that's going to work because what we were told was the U.S. oil companies are going to take over the oil industry in Venezuela. But it's sort of an OPEC nation, so I don't know how
difficult.
all that works together. I can tell you the effect right now on Canada, it's been a bit of a problem for Canada because Canada, we have lots of oil, but unfortunately we have the same type of oil as a similar type of oil as Venezuela. And we used to be unique because the U.S. had to buy oil from Canada because the refineries were set to take care of this type of oil. And we were really the only provider to the U.S., which gave us a bit of a strategic advantage. And what was going on that time was Venezuela was sending a lot of the oil overseas to be refined to China and different areas like that. So now we're in a situation where they have access to the Venezuela oil, probably at discounted prices because they're going to be trouble for them, which puts a bit of a predicament in for Canada. I watched the oil prices today. This is the Monday coming back after the weekend, and U.S. oil companies are up by 5 or 6%, and Canadian oil companies are down by a few percent. So you can see that differential. All of a sudden, in one day, there's about a 7% differential in how oil companies get treated, Canada versus the U.S. So it's going to be interesting to see how that pans out.
Yeah, absolutely. It's obviously, like we said, it all comes back to oil at the end of the day. This isn't the U.S.'s first time, crossing borders and trying to seize, operations, I guess, of some of these countries for that dollar and for that oil. And we talk about the precedents that it sets, which might be really the most concerning thing. A lot of conversation soon after was around even Greenland in that conversation, Colombia and other Latin American countries. That's the biggest concern I think that a lot of people are dealing with right now.
Yeah, you go through, it was funny because you watched Zelensky, and I thought he had a great reaction. He said, well, we know what the U.S. has said they're going to do with dictators, so we know who's next, right? So it was a guy in there. And then his speech went on, and he talked about Colombia and the problems down there. And then he talks about Greenland. Like, I go to Greenland, and the only thing I can think of is they call it Greenland, and it's not that green.
Exactly. That's all I know about it.
They've obviously done something wrong, so they need to be taken over. So it's a bit worrisome. And as I always tell people, there's not much to worry about Canada because it only takes over countries that have low military and high oil reserves. So that wouldn't be us at all. Yeah. So we should be fine here. So we'll see how this goes. I mean, as with all political things that happen, you should not work your portfolio around it because you don't know how long they're going to last and how it's going to turn out. So you should generally keep with the same type of balanced portfolio throughout all this stuff. And it's in the short term, it's a pretty scary thing to see happen. And long term, we don't know what effect it's going to have. The idea of one country being able to go out and arrest another country's leader, think of it happen in other parts of the world, it would be it'd be unthinkable. Yeah, right. So all of a sudden,
roles reversed, and they went to go arrest Trump for things he's done.
All of a sudden, Spain goes and arrests France's leader. Say we're going to arrest him. So it's a pretty odd precedent that's been set. And again, I do have mixed feelings because I do understand it wasn't a great government. It needed to be dealt with. It seems like this stuff should be dealt with by the United Nations rather than a single country is the one thing I always put down there. But the United Nations has been pretty weak in dealing with these things. And I think that's one of the problems we've seen over the last decades. The United Nations keeps on getting weaker and weaker, afraid to make any decisions. And then other people have to step in, which I don't know if it's the right precedence to give one country the ability to rule the world,
Yeah, I agree. It's, we have these systems in place with the United Nations and with other institutions similar to it. And now we're in this position where another country has to step up. And, you asked the question before, does this happen to Venezuela if there are no oil reserves or, precious metals that are in Venezuela? Probably not. It's a really, twisted world that we live in, but at the end of the day, the dollar kind of pushes people to do some things, and here we are with what's gone on now with the U.S. and Venezuela.
Yeah. Well, we'll just sit in Canada and be happy.
Exactly. as for as long as we can. And to your point, Mike, this is why we don't try to speculate what's going to happen next in the markets, because it's entirely out of our control. We have no idea what's going to happen next, and you just balance portfolio.
It's a globally diversified, balanced portfolio is a solution to all this stuff, and then you don't have to think about it as much.
Exactly.
Well, that brings us to another end of another episode with Think Smart with TMFG. Thank you very much for listening.